Be a case where you're giving more jobs to U.S. citizens. Why do you say that that's not what this is about?
Well, it isn't. I mean, we're creating jobs each month, not as many as we would like to create. The unemployment rate is at 4.4%, which in many instances that used to be defined as full employment. Now, there are some areas of the country where the unemployment rate is a little higher, but that's not where the Daca workers are. The Daca workers are where the unemployment rate is already really low. People that want jobs have jobs. People that are looking for work can find work. This isn't about that. If you're trying to raise wages, you have to fix this problem. You have to fix the immigration problem if you want to raise wages for every worker out there.
There is a 6-month delay in ending this program, according to what we've learned from administration officials. What would you like to see Congress do in this time?
Well, I'd like to see them come up with legislation that will give these workers a pathway to citizenship, that will have their rights protected in the meantime so that they can continue to point out unsafe conditions, so that they can continue to join together with their fellow workers to get a better life on the job and increase the wages of every worker out there. Their contributions have been significant to this economy. Ripping that out of the economy would severely hurt not only the Daca workers, but every worker out there.
And as we wrap up, I want to ask you about President Trump. He has been out there saying that he is a champion of the working class. How do you think he has done?
Well, he had a good rap, and a lot of workers bought onto that rap, but he really hasn't done a good job. After he got into president. He's assaulted just about every health and safety regulation that's out there, whether it was protecting us from beryllium or silica. He had attacked the overtime regulations. He's attacked regulations for consumer protection. So he hasn't really done a lot to help workers.
But what about, he would push back and say, well, look at the unemployment rate. It's gone down with me as president. Look at the stock market. It's gone up.
It really hasn't gone down. In fact, the first 6 months in office, he's produced fewer jobs than Obama did in the last 6 months that Obama was in office. So he can't claim credit that he took the unemployment rate down. The job rate, the creation rates this month was 156,000. That's below what's necessary for population growth. So while we inherited a pretty good economy that was on the mend, wages are still flat. Wages still need to be adjusted because workers have gotten behind in this recovery, and the stock market going through the roof doesn't mean anything to a worker whose paycheck is flat and has been flat for the last 10 years.
You left the Manufacturing Council along with other leaders in the wake of the president's handling of Charlottesville. What would it take to get you back to the table with the White House?
Well, we talk to the White House regularly. We talk to them every day. We talk to members of his cabinet every day. So it's not about a matter of talking. It was the symbolism of being on a council after he had that spirited defense of neo-fascists and white supremacists. That was above and beyond. That was just a point that really went to divide the country. And no president since Woodrow Wilson, I don't think, has divided the country. And what we want to do is make a statement that we want a president that'll bring us together. We hope that he becomes that president, that he unites the country rather than polarizes the country, because that'll be good for America.
All right, Richard Trumka, thank you very much.
Happy Labor Day.
Yes, same to you. Happy Labor Day. Well, tomorrow is a big day in Washington with Congress back to work on an ambitious agenda. So what can it mean for Harvey victims who desperately need help? That's just ahead. And we are back with our politics lead. Congress is coming back from recess, and my panel is here to discuss the week ahead. And I have a feeling that it's going to be a very busy week and lots to accomplish here. We have a big announcement, Caitlin, coming from the White House tomorrow when it comes to Daca. You know, the president has changed his thinking on Daca several times. How much did the state's lawsuits against Daca play into this decision, you think?
I think it had a lot to do with it. I think they've really forced his hand here by setting this deadline of September the 5th, because we saw before the president had kind of backed off his campaign promise, which was that he would immediately terminate the program as soon as he got into office. And clearly we didn't see that happen. And we really saw him start to back off it as soon as he won the presidency. In December, he said, we're going to work something out for the Dreamers. Then we saw him progress to Dreamers can rest easy. And just last week, he said that he loved the Dreamers. So they're really forcing his hand, because this is certainly not something the White House wants to be dealing with as they're dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey as well. but the president is kind of been backed into a corner by this deadline.
Right, it does make you wonder with the timing, with everything on the table. And Emily, the White House is essentially leaving it up to Congress for the next 6 months. Congress has been dealing with this, struggling with this issue for more than a decade. What are the chances that this divided Congress will be able to pass legislation replacing Daca?
It's a great question. It's not like this Congress is racking up so many wins.
Right.
It's not like they've been able to produce so much out of this Congress at all. Although I am a little bit optimistic that this is the one thing that can pass. We've spent the past couple of weeks this summer spending so much time having most of the Republican Party trying to distance themselves from the white nationalist base that Trump is really playing into. And I do think this is an opportunity for many Republican leaders in Congress, even Paul Ryan's comments last week, to say, look, it's the process we oppose, not the content. This is incredibly unfair. We've told these people we would take care of them. Now it is time for us to step up. So I think we're seeing a lot of encouraging steps from Republican leaders to really take responsibility.
Congressman, do you agree?
Well, I certainly don't agree that President Trump's base is white nationalists. I mean, just because you disagree with the philosophy doesn't make everybody a racist or a white nationalist. But let me say this, the problems that are with DACA, which I think most people are discussing it, don't even know, but you had to be here before June 15th, 2007. As an example, well, what about June 16th? What about July? Why then? This is a narrow bracket of people.
800,000, around 800,000.
Yeah, it's still a narrow bracket, and it did not solve any problems. Case in point, 2012, there were about 15 what's called unoccupied alien children. 15,000. But 2 years later, that number went to 60,000. None of those are covered by DACA. So the idea of doing this through executive order and not looking at the whole comprehensive picture, I think is ridiculous. I believe it is unconstitutional. That's why 9 attorneys generals are filing this lawsuit. And I think that it is better left up to Congress, who can consider these things and have hearings and so forth. By the way, President Obama also said it was unconstitutional at one point, yet he went ahead and did it.
So you're saying leaving it up to Congress. Congress has a lot of other items on its plate. Of course, as we mentioned, it's coming back tomorrow. It has tax reform to deal with, Harvey funding, the debt ceiling, preventing a government shutdown. What do you think, Congressman? Does the White House need to do more in dealing with Congress to get things done?
No. You know what? Congress has its own self to blame. I was in Congress for 22 years. When you are in the majority, you need to work 5 days a week. You need to work late into the night. You can't do a 3-day-a-week schedule and sit on things. For example, there are 12 different appropriation bills. They're going to pass 8 this week. It should have been done in July. But at least the House is going to act on it. The Senate hasn't passed any of them.
What do you think, Emily? Should the White House carry more of the onus?
Well, I certainly agree that Congress should be working more. But what we're seeing out of this administration is totally different things from every spokesperson. We were seeing just as of last week that the White House Ledge Office was leaking different things about policy to Congress that the president was then saying publicly. Communication is a huge problem on every front in this administration. You don't know the final word until it comes out of the president's mouth. I think it makes it incredibly difficult for him to be working with Congress when they have no idea what he's going to veto.
And tomorrow is also a big day for the president because he's going to be meeting with the Big Six, a team of allies in the cabinet as well as in Congress. They're going to be discussing tax reform. How likely is it, Caitlin, that they're going to be able to get something done on that front?
Well, it's definitely going to be challenging for them. That was #1 on their list, and it's kind of fallen and shifted down with everything that's happened. And certainly aid for Texas and Louisiana in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey is going to be their #1 priority. But the president is going to North Dakota tomorrow to sell his tax reform plan a little bit more. So we will see some progress there potentially. But what's also going to be really interesting about this meeting is that it's his first time meeting with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell since they've been in this very public battle. We know that they had a profanity-laced phone call while the president was on his working vacation in New Jersey. So there's a lot of outcomes that could happen at this meeting.
I'm sure we'll all be watching that.
You know, tax reform, repealing Obamacare, and infrastructure, those are the big 3 that the Republican Party has promised to do. Tax reform is not a Donald Trump idea. It is an idea that's been out there for years. The last major reform, of course, was in 1986. It is time to get this thing done, and I don't think the legislative branch needs to look at the executive branch on these issues.
I want to talk to you because we were mentioning Harvey funding. The president had his second trip down to Texas over the weekend. As you'll recall, the first trip he was criticized for not meeting with the victims, not talking about the victims. This time around, it was a different story. As we see here in this video, he's interacting there with the victims. Do you give him credit, Emily?
I do give him credit for going in and actually spending time with victims. His tone throughout, even in his second trip when he was attacking the media, is incredibly tone deaf, saying, I hope everyone's having a good time. It's incredibly hurtful to people who have just lost their home, lost family members, including tens of thousands of Daca recipients who are in Houston who are currently going out and rescuing people. And then he's saying, look, the top of my agenda is not really to help you all. I'm still planning on cutting billions of dollars from FEMA, from emergency funding, and every other agency that supports disaster relief. I'm also still planning on trying to cut revenue. I'm also still planning on pulling your work permits. So, I mean, yes, I'm thrilled that he spent some time with children, and I'm thrilled that his tone got a little bit more sensitive. But what really comes down to the brass tacks of what is he doing as president?
Congressman, your quick reaction.
Well, number one, he could not go to see victims on the first trip because that would have been counterproductive. They were in 100% search and rescue mode at the time. He's already been there twice. You know, it took Barack Obama 2 weeks to get down to the Gulf after the BP oil spill. 2 weeks. But we don't ever hear criticism about Barack Obama and his insensitivity on it. The president is handling this largest disaster potentially in American history great, and the trains are running on time. The people who are complaining about it aren't in Houston, Texas or Louisiana. They are here in Washington, D.C., and most of it's just the usual partisan sniping.
All right, we're going to wrap it up here. Congressman, thank you very much. Caitlin, Emily, thank you. Appreciate it. Happy Labor Day.